came out the miracle of Quran. Another thing that, in fact, I mean, I'm too embarrassed to mention these things to the extent that I didn't mention it in the introduction that I should have. I probably will in the next edition. This happens to be translation number 19 in English. This is the 19th translation. A friend of mine sent the list of the translations from Beirut. He read it in Beirut where they had a list of all the English translations. And so this is another sign. There are so many signs that I had. God showered me with signs that this is an authorized, that God approves of this. And that you should not have any hesitation about it. And time proves it day after day. I have a letter on my desk that came today from a prisoner who is practically illiterate. You can tell from the way he's writing the letter. And he's telling me that he lost his Quran. Somebody stole his Quran from him. And then he's saying how he treasures it because it's easy to understand. And he had a Yusuf Ali translation, but it's not very difficult. The archaic and classic English of Yusuf Ali, it's a very good translation, but the English is not does not make the Quran available to everybody. And Islam, like any other religion, is first, when it comes to a new land, is first embraced by the oppressed and the poor, and these are the best people. They end up being the best people. So this fellow is in prison, he's practically illiterate, but God made the Quran available to him through this translation. And this is just one example. If you want to see the letter, I have it in my desk. So these letters, ALM, were our sign that this translation that has the name of the mark of Tusan in the front is the authorized English version of Quran. You noticed Latifa's emotional praise of my person when she was talking about the translation. She's reacting to something that's been happening continuously when they argue with you or discuss with you the issue of Quran and Hadith and God alone and idol worship. They make a classic statement that you're idolizing Rashad Khalif. This is classic. And in order to prove it, we want you to go and beat him up or go shoot him or something. Yeah. But this is a classic line that they always say. You are idolizing Rashad Khalif, or you're worshipping Rashad Khalif, or you are Rashadians, or whatever they want to say. But I'm going to address this issue in detail, inshallah, in the khutbah next Friday. But I'm going to mention a rule of thumb that will tell us exactly who is worshipping whom. I mean, you can use this as a criterion for yourself and for anybody else. I want you to open Surah 9, verse 31. I'm going to repeat this in my khutbah, okay? So if you promise not to fall asleep in my next khutbah, I will let you see all these things. Surah 9, verse 31, the top of page 129. Says they have taken their priests and rabbis as lords besides God, or gods besides God, as well as Christ, the Son of Mary. They were commanded not to worship but the one God. There is no God except He. Much too glorious to have partners. Now I want you to notice the first part of the verse. They have taken their priests and rabbis as lords besides God. Now, this was revealed to Muhammad. And it applies to every congregation, every religion. They have taken their scholars, their imams, their priests, and their rabbis as gods besides God. How? How did they do that? They were supposed to worship God alone. But how did they take their scholars, their imams, and their priests, and their rabbis as gods besides God? What is the criteria? And this is what I want you to never forget. The criterion is if the scholar or the priest or the rabbi or the scholar is saying something that is identical to what God says, then you are not worshiping, you are also worshiping God. Because God said, you shall obey God, the messenger, and those in charge among you, or the imams among you, or the priests or the rabbis, for that matter, among you, because of you believers. Because they utter the same things that God is uttering. However, if the imam, or the priest, or the rabbi, or the scholar says something that is different from what God said, if you follow that, then you are worshipping this imam, or this priest, or this scholar, or this rabbi. If he says something that is different from what God said. A good example was last night. Brother Mujahid, bless his heart, went to the MSA last night, and they were having a Quranic study. And in the middle of the Quranic study, he said, please brother, can I ask you a question? And the brother said, go ahead. So he said, how come you pray the noon and the afternoon silently when there is a commandment from God that you shall not pray silently? That you shall not pray loudly, too loud, or too low, but seek an intermediate tone. So they gave him a long spiel about the hadith and the sunnah and the scholars. Now here is an example where the scholar said something different from what God said. And then you are given the freedom of choice. Are you going to choose the words of God or the words of the scholar or the imam? The imam is saying, pray the noon and the afternoon silently. And God says, do not pray silently. This is in Surah 17, verse 110. Do not pray silently. You shall not pray silently. Very clear commandment. Now, the person here makes the choice. Is he going to worship God or worship the imam? Because here we have a difference. See? So the criterion is, if the imam or the priest or the rabbi or the scholar is saying something that is identical to what God said, then you are worshiping God, because God said that. I mean, if the imam or the priest or the rabbi is saying, you shall worship God alone, if you don't obey that, what does it mean? It means you will not worship God alone. And therefore you go into hell. But you have to obey that, because he is saying something that is identical to what God said, and you are not worshiping the imam in that case. You are worshiping God, because he is uttering the words of God or commandments that are identical to what God commanded. So Mujahid asked them, he said, well, whose words do you follow? Anyway, do you follow the words of God or the words of somebody who said that the Prophet said this and that? So they told him, you don't have permission to speak. They said, uh-oh, we're in trouble here. When they found out, I mean, obviously they had no reply to this. I mean, he's coming very strong with the God's commandment on his side, and probably 2,000 angels that they couldn't see.
You know what happened? I remember we mentioned we were going out to dinner, and we saw his friend's car. He couldn't start the car, like as if God didn't want him to go. And he asked us if we could take him there.
So the fellow who was
The
here?
Suleiman, or whatever.
Oh, Suleiman.
Suleiman.
Yeah.
So his car wouldn't start.
That's the least of his problems.
Yeah.
So idol
They
worship.
asked him.
Idol worship is
I didn't know where they
the-
were going. We took them
Yeah.
there.
So Mujahid said, I mean, we're here discussing Quran and religion, and I don't see why I need permission to speak. I mean, everybody was having a discussion here. So they said, okay, the whole thing is over. And they finished everything and they got up and left. So this is the criterion. When you look, let's look up again at the top of page 129. They have taken their priests and rabbis as lords or gods beside God. And this is what the Muslims did en masse. by the millions. They fell in Satan's trap. And they have taken their scholars and imams as God beside God. Because they said things that are different from what God said, and these people followed the scholars. So they are worshipping. I mean, you follow the words of your God. If you follow the words of the scholars, you're worshipping the scholars. If you follow the words of the imam that are different from what God said, you're worshipping the imam. But this is a classic line. Yeah. Ahmed.
I was yesterday, there was a Turkish book that I was reading. It's Imam Bukhari. That he was when he at this time, there was a controversy. And he's following the Bible, following the Quran alone was a problem at the time. So it wasn't a good problem. Even it seems that two sides that he worship God alone. And he was really punishing person. He was still literally who followed Hadith, Sunnah, for whatever. And Imam Bukhari, one time he saw that there was a lot of trouble in Hadith, and he was 16 years old. And then he decided how to prove this Hadith, and then he wanted to clean out all the Hadith that were true. And he spent 15 years to finish the book. So when he finished the book, he was 32 years old.
He made a big mistake. Yeah. That was the first book of Hadith. What he was trying to do, he thought, I'm going to sift out the things that don't make sense that the Prophet taught. What he said, what he's saying in his book is this probably what the Prophet said.
Yeah, because he was trying to say that, all these things is wrong. I'm trying to tell you that anything that, whatever the Quran says, if the Hadith is corresponding to that, then there is something good for it.
Yeah.
But if something else, don't follow it. Yes. Since we started, I want to mention a couple more things. Going back history books, you can always see the first Ottoman Turks or the Turks before that. I never saw so far reading all kind of books that they talk about Muhammad. They talk about Allah, God, but nobody else. You could see from the books that they believed in Allah strictly, but no,
Of course, Hadith and Sunnah did get into Turkey, but I have to admit to a minimal degree.
Yes, so much info.
But the more, when you move east, it keeps increasing until you get to Pakistan, where you see the name of God and Muhammad both on everything, on the buses, and the shops. You need to say Allah Muhammad, always. Next to each other. I mean, it's almost like saying God is Muhammad. Almost.
The second, second God.
Pakistan and India. Yeah.
The same thing like in Christianity.
Exactly.
They're making Jesus like a second God or
So this is where Latifa is coming from, because it's been this has been their line that they have been using, but it is a classic, and we've been hearing it all the time. However, it helps to distinguish, and maybe you are worshiping the Imam. How do you know? This is the criterion that you know. In other words, if I say something that is different from what God said, are you going to listen to me or listen to God's word? You can tell if you are worshiping God or worshiping me by that criterion. And as you know, I wouldn't dare say anything that's different from what God said. You won't let me get away with it. Yeah. Yeah. as long as it conforms with the Quran and you accept it, then you will not worship in me. But if I say something that is different, something different, it is your duty to tell me this is garbage. Yeah. And this is what we do here. I mean, look at God looking at me. I wouldn't dare say something wrong. I would. Thank God. Well, this is at the beginning of this surah. These are heavy. ALM. Our sign that this translation is authorized, and I wouldn't print it otherwise. I was very demanding, and thank God I was. I saw so many signs. Maybe someday I will write them down. I mentioned a lot of them to a lot of you. But you know, it's an awesome responsibility. Because if I write one sentence here that is wrong, and I mislead 100 people, I will be responsible for that. And if you don't know it, I'm the biggest chicken around here. I don't want anybody else's sins, and I have enough of my own. So I don't want to mislead anybody and carry anybody else's misguidance. So the responsibility is awesome. And without comparing with Moses or anything, if you remember, Moses was very reluctant. God said, I'm choosing you as my messenger. I want you to go and deliver the message to Pharaoh. And he said, oh, I don't know even how to talk. And God said, okay, I'm going to send Aaron with you. And he'd say, well, I committed murder in that country, and I'm afraid they will get me. He was just making up all kinds of excuses, because it's an awesome responsibility. ALM. I don't think we even comprehend the significance of these letters. The opposition is beginning to realize what the significance is, and now there's a conspiracy of silence, to use Din Mahmoud's expression. Instead of attacking as they used to, now they are just completely silent. So it is going to overwhelm them, it is going to overtake them, whether they like it or not. Because it is God's miracle, not because I had anything to do with it. In fact, I had nothing to do with it. The new book, you see the new book? Everybody see the new book? Yeah. That new book is going to devastate them utterly. Yes? Let me get it and pass it out. We just have one copy here. This thing is happening gradually and what this book is showing is a visual presentation of this miracle, where I had, for example, in this surah, ALM. Well, I couldn't do it in this surah. Because ALM are very, very frequent letters, so I marked the letters with a star. Not the ALM, but all the other letters. So they can see for themselves how many letters are there. You can see the count. The book before this, the computer speaks with all numbers. And to be honest with you, I don't blame them for not believing the numbers, especially when they are skeptical and everything else. But this here will force the issue on them. What can they say? There's nothing they can say. The counts are there. But I told you about the fellows from Algeria who wrote and said there are 56 Q's in chapter Q, and how they repeated it and re-repeated it, and they had a group of people do it, and every time they come up with 56, And all I did was make a Xerox copy of that, sent it to them. Never heard from them since. Didn't even write and say, yeah, you're right. Alaikum salam. Yes, Mujahid, we were talking about this. I was telling you about your adventure last night at the MSA.
Oh.
I told him that yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say to his first became martyrs before your grandchild was born. But then I said, that's gonna work in the United States.
What is here? Now, no. After ALM, you notice the statement is God, Allah, the one God. Because all these numbers are based on the number 19, which means God is one, right? All these letters, without exception, every single one of them, are multiples of 19. And 19 means God is one. So 19 means one. Wahid. So, in other words, God is providing the meaning of these letters. We may be able to resume the Arabic language tomorrow morning, inshallah. And we didn't get to the numbers, but we will, maybe tomorrow in the morning. But the one, the word one in Arabic is wahid. And four letters, waw, alif, ha, dal. Waw, alif, ha, dal, wahid. And when the Quran came down, there were no numbers. The alphabet was used on numbers. And wa was 6. Before they invented the numbers, the letter wa was 6. The letter alif was 1. 6 and 1 is 7, right? The third letter ha was 8. Wa, 6, alif, 1, ha is 8. Wahid, so 6 and 1 is 7 and 8 is 15. Da was 4. 15 and 4 is 19. So the word wahid is 19. 19 means God is one. So ALM means God is one. So that's the meaning of the first letter. Something nobody ever knew before this group. I had 3 people here who were the 3 people that were incensed about not using the name of Ali in our adhan. They were, I don't know what the occasion was, but I think they wanted everybody to be experts in Arabic first in order to understand the Quran. And they quoted to them Surah 41, verse 44, that says you do not need Arabic, that if you're a believer, the only requirement is to be a believer and God will put the Quran in your heart. And just to demonstrate to them that what God said is the truth, Latifa happened to be sitting next to us, and I told them, here's a Muslim that's relatively new, and you can ask her anything about Quran. Just go ahead and ask her anything about Quran and see if the Quran is in her heart or not. So they thought of the hardest, most difficult, most impossible question. And they told Latifa, okay, tell us the meaning of K-H-Y-A-S at the beginning of Surah 19. And Latifa said, I thought you would never ask. He said, did you know there's a numerical code in Quran? And this KF, AYS are part of the numerical code. And the three of them mumbled, numerical code? What's numerical? I said, you mean you didn't hear about the numerical code? Tell them, Latif, you know. Yes, but they were really, that was a great demonstration for them. They didn't argue after that. And I think something good happened to them. However, they disappeared. I don't know what was it. But that may be a good sign. So this is the privilege that God's grace that He showered on us, alhamdulillah. God is one. There's no God except He, the living, the eternal. He revealed to you this scripture truthfully, confirming previous scriptures, just as He revealed the Torah and the Gospel previously. You see how the numbering of the verse comes in the middle of the statement? This is a continuous sentence. But the number of the verse came in the middle, indicating a deliberate numbering of the verses. As you know, part of this code was that the first surah in the order of revelation consists of 19 verses. So that's a deliberate system. If anybody played around with that, then that fact will disappear. But the first surah, Iqra, read, consists of 19 verses. You will see it in this book. This book should be here, inshallah, in a week or so, 10 days. There's another book that's called Quran, Hadith, and Islam. It also will cover the issue of Quran and Hadith. And you will not be at loss, never again, when they discuss the Quran and Hadith with you. However, we discovered that we had the blue lines here in the office, and I mailed them this morning. So inshallah, they get them Monday. They print the book on Monday or Tuesday, and they will hold this book until the other book is also ready. Then we will ship them both in the middle of the week, inshallah. We're going to have them here, so we'll have some good exercise, and we'll probably invent another national anthem as we unload the books. But that book will tell you that how the first surah in the order of revelation consists of 19 verses, and you see the copy of it. So he revealed the Torah and the Gospel previously is a continuous sentence, because previously is a small, not a capital, to guide the people. He revealed the statute book. The statute book meaning the book of law. Laws. These are God's laws. We have to obey these laws if we are to have a perfect life, happy life.